Hello, my name is Daniel Patrick. I just wanted to say a few words about my own experience as a newspaper reporter and how to sort of deal with hostile people. You know, hostile people are everywhere, whether it's in sales, whether you're dealing with students as a teacher, or in my case, when you were dealing with hostile subjects in order to try to get information for stories within the journalism world. Now, I covered mostly sports, but I did cover politics as well, and I found some universal things about people, whether or not I was dealing with a child, whether or not I was dealing with a high school athlete or even a professional athlete, or, politicians of all types and stature sizes. I dealt with some senators, I dealt with a lot of mayors, I dealt with a lot of school board members, etc., etc., and on the flip side of that in athletics, I sometimes dealt with elementary and middle school athletes all the way up through the pros. And some things I kind of learned were that obviously each and every person is different, but what we are all looking for really is when people we talk to, we want to find someone who sort of understands us. Now, what I found in my own experience, especially as a newspaper reporter, is that a lot of people opened up to me as opposed to some of the other reporters that they were dealing with, simply because of my stature. I'm a very large person. I'm 6'6", and so a lot of the basketball and football players, especially, or for a lot of girls' sports or women's sports, a lot of the volleyball players and basketball players spoke more naturally to me than they did with some of my colleagues, simply because they could see me on an eye-to-eye level, literally and figuratively, because they figured that I had been there before as an athlete myself. So they would say things to me that perhaps they wouldn't say to a lot of the other people that I knew. Now, this also applies to sort of sales. When you're dealing with a person who sees you purely as a salesman who's just trying to take their hard-earned money, they will shut down or get angry with you. Same thing with the students. If they see you as a authoritarian figure who all they will do is get punished if they speak with you, they will speak as little as possible. If they see you as somewhat on their level, or at least able to understand something on their level, I believe that they will open up to you. A lot of books about teaching and coaching involve this, about how new generations of children and young adults today want to be spoken on the same level. They want some level of respect when you deal with them, whereas perhaps in my generation or generations before, we were sort of talked at and bossed around. No one likes that anymore. And really, frankly, a lot of student athletes, especially today, just don't accept it. And they will not play or give you their hardest unless you sort of give them the respect they perceive to deserve. Well, when I was dealing with a lot of high school and college athletes, depending on their level of polish, and what I mean by polish is how used to they were to speaking with reporters, speaking with a lot of other athletes, how used they were to attention. Now, a lot of the ones that were not used to it would sort of close in on themselves, seeing me not only as a reporter that could potentially unearth something that they didn't want to be broadcast, but also simply just a stranger. And, as we've been taught from a young age, no one likes to talk to strangers. Whereas some of the more polished athletes, the stars, either in high school, the ones that were bound for D1 or even D2 colleges, who were sort of used to people like myself holding cameras and recorders in front of their faces, they were able to speak more naturally, or they were able to speak in more mechanical tones. You either had one or the other. Either they were totally comfortable with me, or they were closing in on themselves because they didn't want any more facts to come out about them. You found that also with coaches. Some of the ones that had the most attention were the least accessible, because they had almost grown tired of the game of trying to put a happy face on when they just lost. Now, when you speak to someone who's sort of a hostile subject, you almost have to kind of take a lullaby tone with them. You have to make them believe that, hey, it's okay, that there's more fights to be fought, everything is fine, it's okay that you just lost this state championship game or what have you. On the other side of that, you can almost get away with asking more biting questions after a win because they're more able to do that. You'll see that in coaches like, say, a Lovie Smith. He's a very quiet coach. He's not very animated. And the reason why is he measures his responses so that way he can give as little as possible to the reporters because he's used to reporters, say, nailing them. Now, you'll see that at all levels of athletics and at all levels of politics, where you'll see some of them keep it very close to the vest because they don't want things that they don't want to come out. Whereas some of them are extroverts and will say whatever the heck they wish, so that way they get as much attention as possible. Now, this also applies to sales. Some people don't like to be bothered, and others love the attention. And you have to find the way, and typically you can find that within the people and how they speak back to you within the first 5 to 10 minutes. When someone's asking for help, as I said before, a lot of the adolescents and teenagers and then young adults today, all they want is respect. So you have to talk at a level where they can understand that you have been there before as well. That applies to live text in that you have to pull from information from your own experience. Otherwise, students, especially students who need help in a kind of a vicarious situation where they've got 10 more minutes to turn in a paper, and you're the only thing, and your product is the only thing holding them back from getting an A or a B or a C or failing a class. All they want is that information, but they sure as heck don't want another lecture. So you have to say, been there before. I was in college too. I went to high school and yada, 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 where I had to turn in things in the same sort of way. Now, what can I do to help you so that way we can resolve this and get this over with? And that's the hardest thing to do, is to find that common ground and find it in such a way that they don't see it as a game that you're trying to sell them something that they don't want or need. Because then it can work on two different ways. It's a two-way street where you have to find that common ground with them and speak with them in an adult manner, but also realize that you're not their friend and that you're giving them information. So it's a very fine line that I kind of learned to walk as a journalist. Either there are people who want to know you before they even come close to opening up from what they really want or need, and there are people who will just open up the floodgates and speak their mind regardless, and there are also people that you kind of got to chip away at. And that's something that I've learned, how to almost feel people in a way, so that way I can find the proper way around their little roadblocks in order to get at what they truly need and what I can truly get from them, and then solve their problems. In the journalism world, this was a very, very important skill, because there were times that I needed to ask tough questions. If I didn't, I would be fired. That's, people want to know an athlete's or a coach's dirty laundry. It's just kind of human nature and the nature of the business today. And this really applies to sales as well, because most people, we've been conditioned to not to trust salesmen. They're looking to steal money out of our pockets, so they say. We need to find a way to sort of break down that castle wall around that a lot of these people have placed around themselves, and meet their needs while making money off of them, obviously. In a teaching aspect, it's the same thing, where we need to get the student to understand the information and work hard towards a singular goal that we've set out for them. We need to keep the goal in mind first before we start finding our strategy. And with a lot of students, that strategy is different. Some people actually like a more structured environment where you're kind of speaking at them, kind of conversely of what I said previously. And some people need to speak on their with the person who's on their level. It's just the nature of the beast where every person's different, but really we're all very comfortable with people who are at least somewhat like us or can understand where we come from. The old adage about walking in another person's shoes always takes precedence, whether you're in sales, whether you're in journalism, or whether, frankly, you're just answering questions about how to use a website.